T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Launch Sequence podcast. We are still here. Welcome. It's a little bit of a different show today. I'm going to have different equipment. I can't hear myself, so this is very weird, but podcast is still on. This is the Launch Sequence, your favorite space game podcast where we kind of mostly talk about Star Citizen. And today I've got good friend and also another Star Citizen folk, Morphologis, on to talk about some recent news with me. 3.23, server meshing, getting into testing, and some more. Welcome on, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. And with all that's going on with you on your end, I'm so sorry to hear about what happened.
Well, yeah, it's been that's why actually everything is slightly different in the background for those of you who are watching. Our house here in Turkey, we came back to it's the place that we're kind of renting, and we were away for the holidays to visit my family and working from the States, but we did come back here after a storm hit in December and realized the damage was much worse than we thought. We've lost most of our computer equipment, our studio bedroom, and damage to our living room. So we're kind of working on moving into a place that has been being worked on for the family for a couple years, and we'll hopefully be getting there in the next month and a half. But the community has actually come together to help us figure this situation out temporarily. And Morph, you were also a big part of being there and spreading that message. And you've been asking about this ever since, we got the news in December. So thank you as well for checking in and all that.
No problem. If there's any way I can help, I mean, I got those PC parts. But I just want to say, because I'm sure you're too humble to mention this to your viewers, but if you guys are watching this, there is a GoFundMe for Tomato. And if you want to help him out, please do. He's such a great content creator. I'm going to try to send him some PC parts. I'm not sure if he needs them anymore, considering the community has already come out in force. But
they did.
I'm gonna do what I can also help. So
I appreciate that.
I think you're a great content creator, man. I've loved your content since you started creating it. I think it's such good quality. And I know we've talked in the past about how you kind of looked at my content for kind of inspiration, but actually I've looked at your content for inspiration for making quality stuff to keep my stuff up to snuff. So it's kind of funny how that works. I mean, I think you do such a great job of presenting and structuring your videos in a very digestible way. So I'm really sad to hear what happened, and especially because I know it took you really close to the brink of content creation, which, to be honest, I mean, most content creators might not tell you this, but I think most of us are always kind of at that edge. And if something tragic happens, it can make us have to quit and go on and do something else. It's not as a profitable or glamorous lifestyle as you might think. So I'm just glad the community is there for you. But you know what? I think you deserve it. I mean, the work that you've done and the amount of care you put into it, I can't say I'm not surprised. When we were at CitizenCon, the amount of people who came up to shake your hand, man, was kind of mind-blowing. It was really cool.
It was pretty cool being able to walk around CitizenCon with Morphologis, though.
Yeah, more people recognize you than me, though. If you're like, hey, it's a space tomato.
I get to be on the...
I don't show my face on YouTube.
Yeah, I get to be on the camera a little bit more. You're also much taller, I think, than... You're way taller than I thought. Yeah. So people probably like, wow, that guy's with space mode is really tall.
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked to see how tall a lot of people were. Avenger 1, Croncy, who else?
Crucian,
Meyer, Meyer's tall, super tall. Yeah, everyone's so tall in real life.
Well, thank you, man, so much for taking inspiration from my work. That's that's got to be a content creation goal. It's a fun job to have. Before this, I was doing engineering, and that's probably what I was going to return to if this didn't really work out. But this has been a joy. It's been awesome to be able to meet so many people and get to experience this in so many different ways. But we closed the GoFundMe because it reached a goal that shout out to Beyond the Verse. Check out his podcast as well. He set that up and it reached the goal, one that I didn't even expect to be reached. And I don't want to continue to take money when we don't even know what we're doing, because we still haven't gotten the landlord to come around and really appraise what's happened. And get everything figured out. We're moving out of here soon, so we don't know how much of this we might be covering and all that stuff. So I appreciate the support so much, and you know, I hope that we won't need any more. But for now, I'm definitely pumping the brakes just to make sure that people aren't, you know, just giving money that we can't allocate to something that's going to help us get through this.
Wow. Oh, I can't believe that you hit what. Well, we could talk about this later, but I'm kind of curious what that goal was. I haven't checked in on the GoFundMe since it capped out. You guys closed it because I heard about it when it was being promoted on Twitter, just suddenly. Yeah. So it's the last I know about it.
Yeah. No, we'll get into that. I'm sure that people want to hear a little bit more about the video games. But again, thank you so much.
Yeah, the video games.
Everybody who has come together to support this. As you can see, this is very temporary. I'm on my laptop. You might be able to hear it screaming in the background. The podcast overlay is chugging. We're gonna get things figured out, but it's gonna be a little bit slow getting back to it. You though, I've been watching your content. What? You've been doing a lot of Helldivers stuff lately. How's that been?
I mean, I did 2 Helldivers videos, which did shockingly well. But I think it's because Helldivers was shockingly good. I don't think anybody expected to be quite as good as it ended up being. I had put it on my sci-fi games 2024 list, just as like as it was kind of like in the middle in terms of the ones I was looking forward to. I'd read the synopsis of it or like the description of what it was going to be about, and it seemed really cool. But I had not expected it to be this much fun and like consistently fun. It's just that kind of good old fashioned play with your friends, have a good time, respects your time, importantly, game where you hop in, you have fun, you hop out whenever you want. It's just like there's not a lot of pressure. The stress is like the good kind of stress that you want to have as a gamer, where you know, like, you got to get the stuff done and you want to survive with your friends. It's just I haven't had that kind of experience in a long time in a game, and maybe it's because Star Citizen requires a lot more patience than other games, and it's not the kind of game you can just hop into and have fun. So it's been a refreshing experience, like stepping out the door for a moment to take in a few breaths and then come back in. It's kind of been what it's felt like for me to covering that game.
Cool, man. So yeah, it looks, I mean, from what I've seen, it's got a very strong it's not shy at all about it, Starship Troopers sort of
it's got a lot of references.
Yeah and that caters to like a very active gamer right now. Like a lot of the people who kind of grew up and saw Starship Troopers in their teens or in their 30s and maybe even 40s playing PC games, playing it's got to be on consoles. Xbox
It's on PC and PlayStation. It was released by the Sony Sony was the publisher, but it was made by Arrowhead Games, who's a smaller studio. So
okay.
They've made more like indie. They're more like an indie studio. I mean, this is probably going to make them kind of more mainstream now, considering the huge popularity of this IP. I'm sure that's gotten a lot of people noticed. I mean, I hope Sony notices how popular this is.
Yeah.
And gives them their due for promotion and support. But mostly the games before have been like very popular, but in terms of size and like of the wider gaming community, it's been really niche. Like the last Helldivers was the one that they produced, was top down real time shooter, but it was top down, so it was more like a little bit like an RTS game kind of. You can look at it. I don't have any photos to show you here to pop up on my screen, but you can look it up if you're interested. So this is kind of it was a bit of a leap for them, but I think it kind of hit a perfect time in the gaming community, or the gaming sphere of games, where there's just not a whole lot out there for shooters right now that's innovative, interesting, or exciting. A lot of it's more repetitive, the same old thing you've seen before, but with more and more microtransactions wedged in a way that it just doesn't respect your time. It wants you to keep grinding. It wants you to keep spending money. It's nickel and diming you everywhere you go. And it's just kind of exhausting in a time where people are, I mean, let's be frank, most of us are, financially, a little bit more constrained. It's a lot of people I know in the gaming industry are getting laid off. I mean, that's not necessarily gamers in general, but, like the economy isn't doing great for everybody. So like people don't want to just keep spending money on a video game anymore. They just want to have fun. And use the gaming experience as a way to kind of escape reality for just a little bit, just a couple of hours. The couple hours they have between going back to work and sleep, and whatever real life things they've got to take care of. So it's just the perfect kind of game. It's like you hop and you have fun, and I think that's what makes it so good.
Yeah. We'll have to table that and come back to that later, respecting your time.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's I mean, that goes for all video games though. I mean, I'm not just trying to, just shoot at Star Citizen here.
Hey, I didn't say names.
I know, but I know that's what you're thinking. That's what we're all thinking, because we're Star Citizen content creators primarily. But that just Star Citizen is a different kind of game, a different kind of experience. You're getting something different out of it than Helldivers, and that's why it's a little bit more niche. And I'm happy to, like, we can dive into that a little bit later for sure. But I will say this. I'm not sure how much you want to dwell on this game, but I actually might continue to revisit it, because they're going to be bringing a lot of like new cool content. I think they have mechs and APCs that were leaked that were actually shown functioning in game. So those are coming in. There's probably a third race coming in as well. So it's going to get a lot more interesting, and it seems like it's ripe for making some content around like guides and stuff, because I know I cut my teeth on making guides on YouTube. It was like some of the first videos I made were on PlanetSide 2. Making guides on those, so it can be fun to get back to that kind of content creation. So yeah, I'm not sure if what you meant by different kind of content was just Helldivers, or if you've meant something bigger.
Well, I mean, I think that many people will notice that you've branched out a little bit more recently when it comes to YouTube videos. You did a couple with like for Cyberpunk, I think, a while ago, which I really enjoyed, and I think you also did another one recently with Cyberpunk. But also there was you did a video looking at kind of like the space games coming out, and I think you did another one about a different game before that. Are you just looking to branch out more from Star Citizen over time?
Yeah. So Star Citizen. It's no secret. It's been a bit stagnant for some time, and there's not been a whole lot of new content to talk about. Star Citizen's there's not been a whole lot of progress, tangible progress to discuss for Star Citizen. It's all mostly been content surrounding what's happening behind the scenes in terms of development, but nothing that we can show ourselves. So a lot of what we're doing is showing footage from developers, and everybody is showing the same footage. So it's not that interesting of content in general, and certainly not that interesting for a wider audience. And I wanted to kind of, I mean, like, I'm the same as everybody else. I'm a gamer too. If people are getting bored, I'm getting bored too. I'm susceptible to it as well. I'm not infinitely interested in constantly having the same experience in Star Citizen. So I too am exploring other experiences. I just don't always make videos on it. And I think it'd be a good time in this downtime for Star Citizen to expand out into other content types and see what's there to do. I would like to do more architect review stuff, but that's actually a much harder type of video to make for a number of reasons when it's to do with video games, just because not every game can support making videos like of the quality that I want to do with like free cam and stuff. And there's not a lot of games out there with like architecture to talk about in an interesting way. So yeah, it's difficult. I did that one architect reviews comparison of Cyberpunk, Starfield, and Star Citizen, and that got a lot of people getting all weird. Sorry, Cyberpunk, Star Citizen, and Starfield. That was a really interesting video. I actually had a lot of fun doing that, even though some people are like, "Why are you comparing these games? You should compare GTA 5." I'm not interested in GTA 5. I'm interested in these games, so that's why I did the comparison this way. Whatever. I think they're interesting things to compare, because they have different scopes and focus, and that has different results. And I thought it was really cool to kind of see the different approaches, specifically Starfield and Star Citizen, like their different approaches to development and how that's created a different type of experience. That I argued, you can watch if you're interested. You can watch it. But I said I think that Star Citizen's approach is better than Starfield's approach, just because it's more engaging and and immersive. No, I mean the scale of things. I mean, like, to sum up, the gist of it is that I felt like Starfield, because it was trying to do everything kind of more like on a budget and within a set period of time, I guess you could say. They kind of scaled down a lot of stuff and then tried to make the way that things were modeled feel bigger than they were. So it ends up feeling a bit theme parky, especially for the supposedly biggest city in the human colonized space, New Atlantis. It certainly doesn't feel as big as it should be. When you're there, there's some strangeness when you examine some of the buildings closely, like the scale of them. It doesn't feel quite right. That's why I get this feeling of being like in Disney World or something.
I see.
And you just get taken out of that immersion a little bit because there's not a lot of room for the architecture to breathe, to create districts and personality between the districts. So when you examine something like Cyberpunk, where it's like they had the most amount of time, it's the best example to look at for how to do a good city. Like they really made each district feel like it's got its own personality, have them be interrelated. There's backstories and what have you. Star Citizen doesn't have as much time to focus on a single city, but they still went with this massive real scale that makes it feel amazing. Now they just need to make the content within it feel engaging and interesting. It doesn't have to be to the scale of Cyberpunk, but if they could do the same level of content in Starfield as the Starfield did in say New Babbage, then I think they'll have accomplished a successful player city or a successful city in Star Citizen. So anyway, that's why I did the comparison. I just thought it was really cool to look at, especially somebody who loves Star Citizen. Like what could be done well, what could be done better, what's not done so well in these games, including Star Citizen, what have you. So
yeah, I really
off on a tangent.
No, I like the comparison because there's, it's not a comparison of what game is best. This is a comparison of parts of a game. So I don't know why people would be
right
frustrated with that kind of compare. I mean, I've seen Deus Ex compared to Mass Effect, completely different scales, and they weren't compared for the sense that they're RPGs. They were compared because of their design, their world design, and I think their world design is quite different. But there's a contrast to it that makes it worth it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not gonna lie. When I was doing the Starfield play, Neon was the one that really got me. I was just like, I was very taken aback by how small Neon was. It was basically, I think, 2 hallways with the different doors.
I was shocked too.
Stores, yeah. Because I was expecting something kind of like Mass Effect, where each city was pretty well developed.
Yeah, the scale of everything just felt too tiny. I remember the promotional material of that city with an animation that made it look like a cyberpunk-esque size city when it ended up being just like this little tiny island thing on a yeah, there's some, I mean, like I enjoyed Starfield, but there's certainly some elements of it that suffered from the way that they focused their scope in that game.
Mm-hmm.
So
are you thinking you're gonna keep on? Are you waiting for Star Citizen to pick back up, or are you thinking long term you kind of want the channel to be a little bit more about general gaming?
Not general gaming. I don't think I'm interested in general gaming myself, so it'd be hard for me to just do videos on every single game. But I certainly want to do other games to kind of, find other things and gain more insight. I mean, I think as a content creator, like getting some insight into from other projects and how they're done provides some additional like context when I look back at Star Citizen. If I stay too focused on one thing, then you kind of stay in that echo chamber of that experience, and you may not see things as clearly. Like what's fun, for example, like what is respecting your time? What does that mean? I think looking at finding a game that respects your time is a good way to see how could Star Citizen be improved? What might I say as a critique, a constructive criticism to kind of hopefully, encourage the game to be in the way I hope it might be. Not to say that I have any more sway than anybody else in the community, but since, I have a platform, I certainly want to try to help.
I don't know that A2
get
nerf.
Constructive ideas out there.
Whose fault was that, buddy? Who nerfed my A2?
Right, yeah, because the A2 certainly is nerfed now, right? You can't drop a size 10 by yourself still, right?
I don't know what's happened with that ship, but I will never forget the episode of just panic about your words about that ship. Speaking of which,
by the way, I know there's going to be some A2 comments. I'm sure there's always some. I stand by that. I will triple, quadruple down on it. I think that ship is not a good design for fun.
At least for the game right now. Yeah.
Anyway, no, it's just for the game right now. It's not fun that one person can take a ship and do so much destruction to everybody else who needs to be much more organized in order to counter it. You wouldn't find a game like that, a ship like that, and say like PlanetSide 2, which is, I'd say, a very well balanced game.
See, now
and
you need
survived
to,
for a very long time.
You got to make a video now, just comparing bombers between Cyberpunk, Starfield, and Star Citizen, so that we can know.
Yeah, right.
Which one has the best?
Of course.
All right. Speaking of Star
going
Citizen,
back to PlanetSide 2 would be fun to kind of talk about ground and air balance, like mixed combat balance, and how they were able to achieve some balance in that game. Even though right now it's kind of, I think it's on the downturn now. I know Rel left, unfortunately. It was kind of sad to hear that. He was the head developer. He used to be a content creator before that, covered the game.
Oh, nice.
So I think they've got PlanetSide 2 got sold as well to another developer. So anyway.
Well, yeah, I think I've heard things about PlanetSide 2 that make me think this sounds a lot like what Star Citizen is trying to do, at least in their warfare side of things. So I think that would be an interesting video, like a retrospective on what PlanetSide 2 did well and how that could work in Star Citizen in some ways. That'd be cool.
Certainly, definitely.
All right, speaking of Star Citizen, let's talk about the big news. I think as of yesterday, server meshing is now being tested in Evocati. And obviously, this does not mean that dynamic server meshing is allowing an Idris to be split into multiple servers and for Pico to fly into the coil with, gosh, what's his name? Mark Hamill. No, this is very basic. It's Star Citizen. This is going to be a super, super initial version of this. But are you hyped? Are you feeling good about that? Or are you hesitant?
I have been excited since CitizenCon for the tech. My excitement has not waned for like the future of the game. There's just not much going on right at the moment to cover, but it's good news to hear that they're testing it again, which means that they've gained some additional confidence in moving forward and scaling the tech up, which is this is great. Now I am able to disclose that I am Evocati, but I was not able to test it, so I have no additional information to give you guys. It happened during a time where I was not awake, so unfortunately, it was a 4-hour playtest. But what I have heard is that it was pretty successful. They had Stanton and Pyro not connected via warp gate. If you went through the warp gate, apparently the game would crash, so you weren't allowed to go through the jump gate. Sorry, and Pyro had no missions running. Well, pretty much no missions. Apparently, one person got a mission to work from Stanton. But anyway, it was just kind of testing these two different locations together, connected through the replication layer, and seeing if they crash. What?
Hold on, there were no missions working in Pyro, but somebody got a mission from Stanton.
No, somebody in Stanton got a mission to Pyro. I know, it doesn't make it. It's really weird.
Oh, I mean, either way, that's interesting, because I wonder if that's like a fun glitch of the system working, or a bad glitch of just like, what the heck is this?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, like right now you can get bounty hunting missions from across Stanton, right, in another part of the solar system. Right. So I would assume that when they first integrate Pyro, is that you're going to get missions from Pyro in Stanton to go to, unless they make the regional mission stuff work, or they set it up that way. But who knows if that's going to happen?
I mean, now you're starting to get into like data running territory, because originally they talked about the idea of jump gates being bottlenecks for information, and how does somebody in one system get like a cargo or bounty mission in another one. Now, I'm sure they're going to ignore that completely for these first few patches or years or whatever, but
God, first few years? Oh no, please no.
Look, I'm not putting myself in the position to answer questions, all right? I'm gonna tell you, it might be years. Who knows?
Realistically speaking, it very well is likely to be, yes.
But as they're working through this, I do wonder if that's just like a clear sign of, hey, you might not be able to go through the jump gate, but these two systems are definitely connected, because you're seeing missions from one to the other.
I mean, I think it's not an indicator that server meshing won't have two star systems, if that's what you're saying. I think it's just they're testing the way it's connected to the replication layer. Yeah.
More so that like you could just be like, oh, nothing's actually. They're just running two different servers with two systems. What's the point? But then if you get a mission from one system in another system, then it's kind of like, oh, okay, maybe this is actually passing information back and forth. I guess
Yeah.
more of a confirmation for a conspiracist that maybe it is actually server meshing.
Oh man, those conspiracists saying there's people are saying that they're faking it or something. There's always
Oh
people
no,
like
I
that
don't,
talking about
man.
Star Wars. Like
Dude,
they're
I haven't seen any of this yet. I'm just assuming. Because I mean, we've just been working on the house this whole time. I woke up, I saw that server meshing's getting tested. Or no, sorry, this was yesterday. I saw it was getting tested, and I was like, ooh, that's what we should talk about tomorrow. I'm going to go in with a little bit of surprise. I didn't actually know you were Evocati and you could have gotten some chance to test it, but I haven't looked
wish here's the wild part that I've not heard anybody talk about yet, and I don't know if CIG thought about this. Maybe they did and they don't mind this, but as a content creator who's Evocati, since we can talk about what's happening in Evocati, I would say being an Evocati is kind of a big deal if you want to talk about what's happening next. It didn't
Oh
used to
yeah.
be that way because you can't record anything from Evocati and prepare it ahead of time. All you really do is you just get a heads up on what's coming, and then you can, maybe kind of shape your content structure around that a little bit. But stuff changes so much from Evo to going to Wave 1 that it's almost useless sometimes. Like the Evo is kind of a mess with hardly stuff really held together with like tape and toothpicks and stuff. It can get really jank. So it's not always reliable. But in this case, for example, like you could basically answer questions that nobody else can as a content creator. I'm sure lots of people want to do Q&A with a content creator who's just been in Evo testing something as big as server meshing.
Yeah.
So
that's
kind of a interesting thing.
I don't want to now pursue Evocati for that. I wanted to be Evocati for a bit at one point because I thought I was going to get into game dev, and QA is a great way to do that. We've all been told. But while I test bugs, I don't think I ever do it enough for Evo. But yeah, now it's like this is a conversation most people won't have to have or consider. But that's the difference between certain successful months, possibly. If I can do a deep dive on a topic that's being tested in Evocati with my own experience versus just watching what everyone else is watching, that definitely can make a big deal. I never even thought about that. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I thought about the other day, and I don't know, it's probably going to make some people feel a little uncomfortable. Not really on subject for what we're discussing here, but I just thought it was an interesting point. But
that's kind of how the PTU is too. Like
it kind of is how the PTU is. Yeah, but a lot of people can get access to it just by being a subscriber. So
yeah, that's fair.
Just gotta pay it.
So this is, I mean, we've been hearing about the replication layer being separated. That was kind of the next step people were expecting after CitizenCon. And it didn't really sound too much like it was going well. I think most people were coming to that conclusion. Now we don't know what's actually going on, but they hadn't come out and been like, yeah, we're separated. They just kind of have now started testing server meshing. Do you think things were going better and they just didn't say, which is crazy? Or do you think they're kind of brute forcing ahead and fixing things as they go?
Obviously, this is speculation, but
yeah.
Based on what we've seen, I think that the replication layer has turned out to be more complicated and difficult to get a handle on than they maybe expected. But I think another big factor of it is that they don't want a repeat of 3.18 from last year, which was not a good time for Star Citizen. And I'm sure it hit the sales a little bit, like their funding is now a lot more tight than it was last year. You can tell by the amount of ship sales they've already had this year that they didn't have before,
The flash sale of all the ships from last year, man.
Yeah, they're doing that a lot more, and the F8C being sold, so that was never supposed to really happen as far as we understood, who've been following the project. That was supposed to happen when Squadron was released, and I don't see Squadron, so what's going on with that? Anyway, that's last year's news. But anyway, my point is, they probably want to make sure that it's much more stable this time before they get it out to a patch, which I think everybody can agree is a good idea. 3.18 locked some people out of the experience for quite some time and turned a lot of possible backers away from the experience in the free flies. So they need to wait to get this right, this pivotal tech. Great, fine. At least we've got a lot more content coming in 3.23 to look forward to. That's going to give us some stuff to chew on for a little while before we start feeling the kind of the boredom again before we start getting some like meaty content with like stuff to do, you know, like I'm talking missions and stories and more play space and stuff like that. So I think that's what's happening with replication layer. It looks like it's going to be in 3.23. They very quietly moved away from 3.22.x in the cards to 3.23. No ceremony there, but I mean, I saw that coming. I don't know if anybody else did, but I did.
I mean, yeah, by like December, I was like, this isn't.
Yeah.
Just wait. Yeah, it's not. The replication layer separation is, for those who don't know, the biggest thing we're going to notice from that as players is crash recovery, is being able to avoid completely disconnecting from a server when something happens and being able to kind of just wait and then the game continues.
In replication layer, technically speaking, is also server meshing, because it's meshing a server with our server. It's just taking the structure of ownership of the entities in our universe and putting it on a separate server that can then be replicated to other servers, to make so that the universe information is shared across every server. With the idea being, you know, when servers are meshed, you need to be able to communicate that, you know, you're in a ship, and when you go to the next server, that server needs to know that you're in a ship. So that replication layer is like communicating that information on the most basic level, that's happening. Without it, we can't have server meshing. So testing of that is just saying there's another server recording that. Is it working? Yes, good. Let's move forward to the meshing bit, which is what they were just testing. So they have the replication layer working, and now they're meshing servers through the replication layer. So that's the next step, which is kind of crazy that they're doing that. So
server meshing is like this crazy love child movie directed by Christopher Nolan, morphing Inception and The Matrix together, and it's just servers all the way down. The universe is made up of servers. I don't know. I feel like
it's more like a Michael Bay movie because there's a lot of explosions.
that's you just made the expectations versus reality meme there. That's we all
wanted Christopher Nolan, but we're getting Michael Bay.
Yeah, because man, it really is gnarly. I mean, I'm working on a video right now to kind of explain it, and I was detailing the idea of the replication layer and how it was trying to take this information from every little bit in the 64-bit environment and then just freaking pass it out to all these things that are supposed to be dynamically reshaping themselves, and also passing out all this information to a bunch of other players around the world. It's just what they've set out to do is like, people are like, oh, this is taking so much time and so much money, and at one point you got to ask the question, how much is too much? And it feels like we're approaching it. I mean, I don't mean to say that about Star Citizen. I mean to say that technologically, like, we can only do so much networking before it's just kind of like, why are we doing all this networking? I mean, at some point, I guess we'll be passing information to different planets, and we'll have plenty of overhead at that point. But right now, it's just like, man, we can. I don't know. MMOs are insane. It's all insane. That's my conclusion. Server meshing is crazy.
It is nuts. The technology that they're trying to make is nothing short of crazy. And if you've been following development, you'll know that it's kind of nuts to see it work. So yeah, they're definitely pushing the envelope here with the game, with the technology.
Yeah.
And it's necessary to make the game that we want it to be, with the amount of detail that we want it to be, which is kind of the part that's hard to explain to people outside and even inside the community who aren't following development closely. And I'm not trying to make excuses for CIG, but certainly what they're trying to do with the complexity of Star Citizen, it makes it harder to do than other server meshed games that you may have seen out there. So,
and you know, I know there are folks typing up comments right now actively. We understand that there are other games that do server meshing, and server meshing as a technology is existent. It's more the combination of the things that they're trying to do here, for the sake of a game, that is what gets me, I think. Server meshing is being tested though, and this is something that is it's a little bit surreal, because every freaking year we think it's going to start being tested the next year. And every year it's always like, oh, this year it's PES. Oh, this year it's the replication layer. This year it's optic container streaming. And now it's actually server meshing. Are you feeling short-term hope for the like? Do you think that this is going to be something that turns into a noticeable change in the game this year?
Yeah, I think they're shooting for a simple version of static server meshing this year for Pyro. I mean, I think we all pretty much who've been following it know that that's the goal, to get Pyro
well
in 2024 with static server meshing.
That's where I want to stop you. Besides getting Pyro in, specifically, do you think this will be a noticeable change in gameplay? A lot of the things people have said were problems have been based around networking.
Right. Well, initially, I guess there's not going to be any difference, because the way that I think they might do it is just separating Stanton and Pyro into two statically meshed environments. And if that's the case, bad news for everyone. And that might be that the server performance is not going to be any better. In fact, may even be worse. So until we start getting more meshed environments that are breaking down the play spaces into smaller sections, I think we're not going to see that FPS. Ultimately, what we're talking about is the tick rate in the server being higher, because that's what determines the performance of AI. And AI are kind of like the backbone of the experience of Star Citizen, to make it feel real and lived in. I mean, once upon a time, we used to have AI flying around landing zones and stuff and making it look realistic. And now all we have are derping out AI NPCs walking around, T-posing and running into walls.
That was one patch, right? They did that for one patch, and then they were like, okay, this don't work.
Yeah, servers can't handle it.
Yeah.
Cut it. Yeah, so it's so important to have it. And like AI, all our missions are based around AI as well. So like the way that the chips provide a threat, and also security as well is a big problem, right, with server performance. Like the law system can't function without functioning AI. Otherwise, how are players going to be protected in supposedly safe zones? Like around stations, for example, right now, turrets have trouble keeping up with tracking enemies, and NPCs on the ground certainly can't do much in a lot of cases to respond to a threat. So it's hampering a lot of the gameplay systems they have and want to do with Star Citizen. So we want to get to the point then where those perform well, and that's definitely going to be part of what server meshing helps with. But to get back to the point, initially it seems like it's going to be making sure the tech works to make the play space bigger but not perform better. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to quickly break it down, because the next step after that in static server meshing is not straight to dynamic server meshing. It's going to be breaking down the environment into smaller pieces and seeing how those different environments interact.
And
see what breaks.
And from what we've kind of heard now, we had a episode about server meshing a few weeks back with Tibio and Kevin Riggle. And one of the things they were talking about was that period of static server meshing is actually their most money burning, they're most expensive, because they want to move to dynamic so that they don't have to have a bunch of servers running all the time if they don't need to be. So I'm wondering if they are going to try and push more quickly to get to dynamic server meshing than we would expect.
That's a good point, but I think that in general the mesh environment is going to be more expensive than it is right now, because they need more servers to run it. You need a server.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need server resources at least for the replication layer. If it's not on its own box, it's a virtual machine within an existing box at an Amazon server farm or whatever. So it's going to be expensive. They're renting this stuff for making the meshed environment. Yeah, certainly they want to get to a more efficient system, I would imagine, but it's one step at a time. They got to make sure the tech works first and foremost. So
man, I hope the tech works. It feels
it's working, technically speaking. The recovery I heard from the crash. So I don't know if you heard this yet, but apparently the mesh environment in Stanton crashed. Pyro didn't, so it stayed up. So that was success. Didn't cause the other shard to crash.
Oh, that's cool.
And it recovered in two minutes, whereas the last test was 2 hours. So there was a huge improvement to the recovery time, spinning back up and getting people back to where they were. 2 minutes is a long time, but it's better than 2 hours. So it's not ready for showtime yet. We're not going to see this in 3.23 certainly, but we might see it in playtest in the testing environment. What do they call it? The tech preview environment. We might see that actually. I think, in fact, I would be pretty certain that we're going to see that soon in a tech preview. Like if they're testing an Evocati in tech preview, if they want to scale it up, they're probably going to move on to a tech preview for the wider wave 1, wave 2, and wave 6, whatever.
I could see one either around or before 323 goes live.
I'm sure that they could do that. Yeah. And I think very much the team that's working on it is moving at their own pace as quickly as possible. And we don't know. I know it's hard to tell when it's going to happen. It could happen right in the middle of a patch cycle when we don't expect a good patch to come out. Like what's happening with 320, like 323, we don't even have any Evocati yet, but they're testing server meshing right now and Evocati with this. It's like kind of in the middle.
Where we're at is so like unprecedented. I feel like every year gets a little bit more so, but like even during the PES cycle of waiting and just confusion and not knowing what features were coming, we knew that after PES was server meshing. But after server meshing is like, more static server meshing, dynamic server meshing, but we don't actually have a good idea of what their mid to long-term plans are for the next 6 to 12 to 18 months like we ever have before.
And actually, they're at a pivotal moment in their development where they're shifting people back from Squadron, as you guys already know. I mean, Tomato, you've mentioned it, I've mentioned it. We've kind of hit that home since CitizenCon, because they've talked about it. But they are still getting the teams into their plans for this year. And I'm sure a lot of them are already getting going. But this is going to start to really change the development pace, at least I hope, going forward for Star Citizen specifically. And we're not going to, I think, start seeing that until maybe after 323, after the squadron-based features have been converted. Then we're going to really start seeing what the change really feels like of having a lot of developers working directly on Star Citizen MMO-focused content, which is what we're really excited for.
Yeah, and we're about to get into that. I want to go back to something you were talking about earlier before now. Server meshing is awesome, and we'll probably talk more about that in future episodes, but I don't want to take up all of our time with it. I want to talk about some of the big, more polarizing features that we have coming out. And I think this is more of a topic than a feature, but one of the things you mentioned earlier was AI and security. And I think that is a topic that a lot of people are worried and a little confused about, because we haven't gotten a super clear message on how it's going to work. But crime, PvP, and reputation are super closely intertwined and obviously make people nervous. What did you mean when you mentioned that security would be there as AI to make these systems more safe? Some people are thinking this is just going to be always PvP, kind of always in danger, and it might not be the game for them, but it sounds like you're suggesting they might be a little safer than that.
Right, yeah. So we know from, and this is not like speculation, this is from what they've talked about, especially with Pyro, because this is more recent stuff that they've kind of gone into with updating how reputation and security is going to work with stations, and this is definitely going to be a thing in Stanton as well. So if you ever go through one of the landing zones or one of the space stations, you'll notice that there's like a security gate that's always open, right? Well, and you might even notice that some of those locations have turrets in the ceiling if you look closely enough. Eventually those things are going to function, and if you've got bad reputation, basically this is a system separate from the criminal system. So the criminal system just gives you, like, if you committed a crime, you get a crime stat, and if you get a high crime stat, you get chased and sent to prison. But after you've served your sentence, in the current system, there's no lingering effect from being a bad guy. If you keep doing the bad stuff, the only way that people know is maybe they recognize your name. That's it. They don't know that you're a bad guy. That's not really realistic, and that's not a good way to do security. And so reputation is supposed to be the long-term effect of your choices of players having consequences to your actions. So if you're constantly killing people, constantly being the bad guy, and specifically against factions and like the Stanton system, for example, keep killing ArcCorp security. Well, ArcCorp's not going to like you when you try to land on their stations. They won't let you. And if you get on board, they'll shoot you. And in order for that to work, well, the AI needs to work, right? The AI in the stations needs to be a threat to you. The turrets need to be a threat. So there need to be tangible consequences to your actions beyond just like a text saying that we don't like you, please don't come here, right? So that's why it's important for the AI to function well, for the server FPS to be high. Because Star Citizen is a game about consequences without any artificial restrictions. That's the goal that they've always set. There's not like this hard zone that says you can't have guns here. I mean, that exists now, but that's never been the intention. So like when you go on a space station, you should be able to take your gun out, but there are going to be consequences to that action. There are scanners to stop you from taking that past security and what have you. That's the plan going forward. And Pyro is going to be the first, hopefully, the way they explained it, is going to be the first integration of that idea where there's no security really in Pyro. It's about reputation with the gangs, and the gangs own different stations in Pyro. And so if you are constantly killing one gang, that gang's not going to like you, and you can't land at their stations. But you can land at the other gang stations. They'll be cool with you, you know. And then you go up through the ranks in that gang and get benefits and what have you. But that's kind of that's how security is going to work. And I imagine that's going to play a big role in jump points and how you're able to pass, if you're able to pass through jump points.
I didn't think about that.
Without getting shot at. And those are those are choke points, right? So that you want to have pretty good reputation. Otherwise, you're gonna have to figure out some other way to get to other locations, right? Other star systems. But that comes much later. Again, with server meshing, we can't get there without server meshing. So
yeah, I think that there's also a lot of ramifications to this that could ease people's worries about other things that this game wants to do. Missions and beacons, you know, getting a medical rescue. A lot of people are scared to do that because they don't know if that person's going to come and kill them. Reputation's the kind of system that would tell you, hey, this person comes and kills people. don't
exactly.
It's like the Google reviews, right?
Right, exactly.
So,
you know, and in worst case scenario, they shouldn't even be able to take those missions because they don't have good enough rep to work with the organization that issues the medical beacons. So you'd have to have decent rep to begin with to get those missions in the first place. So yeah, once that comes into play, then we don't have as many issues as we have right now. But that's the idea anyway.
Yeah, and
seems like it'll work.
It's never a perfect system. Things are going to slip through the cracks. People are going to be able to gain a reputation and still do their griefing. Like, that's always going to happen. This is meant to try and generalize the mindset the community has. Because right now, nobody can trust anyone. And this is a game where you kind of have to trust people in order to get by and to be successful. You need to play with others to get the most out of Star Citizen. Yes, you can play solo, but reputation is like an accountability system. That being said, though, you can only get so many turrets in a city, right? Somebody could come into the middle of a city with something and then blow a bunch of people up. And yes, they'll get a consequence for that, but those people might have gotten their day ruined. So there are a lot of nuances to this discussion, but I think that's one of the big things coming in 3.23 that's going to make a big change to the game.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly ways that they're going to need to explore on how to balance security and how to make it effective. I mean, EVE Online's idea was just like you commit a crime and suddenly police ships appear and kill you instantly. That's probably not as immersive for Star Citizen, but they're definitely gonna have to think critically on how to make it effective.
And this system is also how bounty hunting is going to work, because they're gonna, like you said, you're killing people, and that might not be in your crime stat, but it'll be in your record, and people can go and look that up. But we haven't really heard much about bounty hunting. Like, they talked about it a bit, and then I think stopped.
Here's another interesting thing about how a server mesh environment could actually make security higher is if there are more people on the server, there's more people to take up those bounty missions and to chase after the bad guys, right? Just by numbers. So, I mean, there could also be more bad guys too, but I think there's going to be fewer bad guys than there will be good guys. So probably they're gonna have a tougher time in high security space, just trolling as you say, going around and blowing stuff up.
I like to think that the worst pirates will probably stay in Pyro, because that's where it'll be easy to be a pirate, and the best pirates will be in Stanton and other systems. Kind of like how the best, I guess, combat or PvP associated players will probably spend a lot of their time in Pyro if they're lawful, and then, you know, the people who don't really want to do that much will spend their time in Stanton. Like a little reverse situation.
Yeah, well, it depends on that's another thing that CIAs are going to have to balance. They have to put incentives for pirates to want to be in Pyro. Otherwise, they're just going to stay in Stanton where the lawful people are with the expensive packages. You know, like basically they have to make, say, very, very profitable cargo runs, something that lawful players want to do in Pyro in order to keep the pirate players in Pyro, because then they're going to go after the most valuable cargo, which is in Pyro, right? Otherwise, they're just going to stay in Stanton.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because it looks cool in Piratey doesn't mean that people are going to stay in Pyro, which is a worry. But I mean, we don't have Pyro yet, so we can't judge it so much yet.
Yeah, you gotta.
And there's hardly any gameplay systems. So.
You gotta bait the pirates to stay in Pyro by bringing the other players.
Right.
In.
Yeah.
But then you also have to make
exactly
like, non-combative pirate gameplay that's pretty easy to get into in Pyro, so that pirates aren't going to Stanton to try and do non-combative missions that are pretty easy to get into there. And then reputation, it's a complicated thing. There's a lot to it. I
think the reputation might help a lot. It needs to tie into Stanton. So if the reputation's really bad with security in Stanton, I think simultaneously when it comes in for the stations in Pyro, if you're a pirate with low rep, you shouldn't be able to land at any of the Stanton space stations except for Grimhex. You know, that would be your base of operations. And that would make a whole lot of sense. And that would be your consequence to being a pirate. I mean, like, Stanton's not that big, but it's still a long jump to go from the warp gate to the jump gate to Grimhex and the Crusader area. So
you're an island.
I think there's real consequences. Hopefully we'll start making security make a lot more sense, and why they might want to go to Pyro instead of Stanton, because they can land at the stations there. They have reputation with the gangs to be able to go there and refuel, rearm, buy weapons and what have you. And by the way, we know that there's going to be certain weapons you can buy in Pyro that you can't buy in Stanton. You know, black market stuff, railguns and rocket launchers and stuff that you can't buy in the Stanton system anywhere.
What do you think is happening though with bounty hunting and refining? Like, both of those things were in monthly reports. I don't think they mentioned refining in ISC, but they were focusing on bounty hunting for a while. Could be closely intertwined with the quantum simulation, so maybe delayed based on that. Could be something they're waiting for 4.0. Why do you think it's gone from coverage?
Oof, you know, I know from experience covering this game that things just suddenly get shelved because of a blocker that will sometimes suddenly happen, and then they are retasked to do other things for a while. So they'll put that on hold and they'll work on something else. So that might have happened to bounty hunting, because that was on the roadmap for a long time, and it suddenly is just, you know, it's off the radar now.
Yeah.
Not in 323. You know, I think it's been shelved for now. Would be my guess.
Yeah, it
and
seems
they're
like
focusing on other stuff.
I think,
but they're retasking teams, so. Who knows? Maybe someone's getting retasked with it.
I think it's quantum. I think the simulation's delaying it.
Maybe. I'm not so sure about that. I think yeah, I'm not so sure.
Could be a lot of things.
I mean, I know they're working on it because the economy team came on and they were talking about how they were doing these economy fixes, but they never mentioned Quanta once.
Exactly.
So they're working on the economy, but not working on Quanta. So it seems like that's been put on pause for whatever reason, and they're working on some basic economy now stuff first. So
that's why I think it's delayed it, because it was based on that whole not probability volumes, virtual AI, which is linked to the quantum simulation. So I'm thinking, you know, maybe they can't do it, and they're trying to do something different with bounty hunting.
Yeah, maybe.
Another pretty contentious topic. We got a few to go through real quick. We'll get to master modes, but first, distribution centers. These are interesting new archetype of location, something they kind of built off of what we originally saw as the new UGF, and they're now claiming is like the center of gameplay, at least on the ground. What are your thoughts on
them? I think the distribution centers are pretty darn cool. A new gameplay area is exactly what I'm hoping to see out of Star Citizen updates. Like we just need more stuff to do, and it's more stuff to do in a cool location. And it kind of demonstrates that Stanton is a huge system as it is, and that there's still plenty of real estate for making more interesting content, right? It's a perfect demonstrator for that. Unfortunately, or maybe it's not unfortunately, I think that we got to maybe limit our expectations for what the first iteration is going to bring for new content for missions. It's going to be a new location, but my expectation is probably we're going to see the same types of missions that we already have there, like cargo shipping missions and you know, bounty hunting kill missions where the NPCs are just there and you just go kill them, right? I think that's what we're going to get in the initial release, because they said the raids, they're not even planned for right now, 2024. So I think they're cool. They're really cool, but unfortunately, the really interesting content is not there yet. So it's really just going to initially be an interesting new backdrop to existing mission types. I do hope that they throw some new mission types in there, though. I really do. I think we really need that, and reputation too. I think that they did say reputation might be part of the 323 release, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure.
They did. Yeah. So kind of like a better than cargo decks as an addition.
Yeah, cargo decks was a big nothing burger, wasn't it? It was just like, hey, we got cargo decks.
Man, that was a bad one.
Now?
So
like, what are they gonna? They haven't even talked about what they're gonna do with cargo decks in the context of having the cargo elevators.
Right?
Like, is that are we gonna go down there and like sort stuff out? And like they've talked. Like,
man. See, now that's a video I also kind of want to make, because like, what the heck are cargo decks there for? Like, we were supposed to be getting our stuff up at the cargo deck and then seeing it shipped to the elevator and go to our hangar. Now you can't see it. There's no reason. There's no, like, they don't even have cargo hangars at the cargo decks where freight movers are supposed to land, as opposed to a civilian. No, maybe they'll do that with space stations, but yeah, their situation with space stations is bad right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they need to re-examine whoever takes on the PU director seat from Todd Pappy. I hope that they're, they re-examine some of the locations and try to leverage some interesting possible content out of them. I can imagine, like, we've been so limited and things have been kind of so stagnant in Star Citizen, the PU, for so long, that we kind of forget about like the potential of like what you could do on a space station. Imagine if the cargo decks expanded a little bit, and there are missions to do in those cargo decks, because the stations are legitimately huge. Like, they are massive locations.
They should be like the distribution centers, just in space.
Yeah. Basically in space. So you can imagine you go through there, you got to do some maintenance. Maybe you got to clear out a gang that's that's attacking one portion of it, a la like some of the cool stuff they're doing in Pyro. Like, bring some of those interesting ideas to Pyro, to Stanton, with maybe a lawful twist.
Yeah.
Because Pyro's like, everything's run down, right?
There's a ton of potential, and I think the same goes for these distribution centers. We can see it better because they've given us, like, space stations have not been covered in depth for a long time. I don't know why not, but with distribution centers, we saw the UGF presentation in 2022. We saw the work they were doing on them again at the beginning of last year. And then now in both CitizenCon and now in ISC, we've gotten so much ability to kind of theory craft and see the way that what's being worked on in the game right now, like engineering and mining, can be associated with these locations. Space stations don't have that. So I'm sitting here realizing that, okay, in distribution centers, we're going to see mining. There's probably engineering opportunities where you can be sent there to like repair something. There's cargo hauling, as they've said. There's the FPS stuff like you're saying. But then going beyond that, they could probably do ground-based exploration missions nearby and other things like that. And it's just like, why hasn't that been applied to space stations, which have always been here already? Why am I not going to like some random space station and restarting a wing by pressing a button to get power back?
Yeah, maybe you've got creatures, maybe clear out an infestation, maybe a little Helldivers-esque experience. You got to run in there and kill some of the bugs that have got on board. Clear bug infestation.
Yeah, that's actually
there's some cool options, some cool possibilities.
Do you think that this is going to be? Actually, no. Here's the big question I want to ask you on this. Mm-hmm. They were originally kind of making these seem like they were going to replace UGFs, underground facilities, the things that were purpose-built for a CitizenCon demo and are the only places we've been able to play the game for so long. But they're not replacing them. They are going to be besides them. So do you think that we're going to see an expansion from UGFs, or they'll be phased out in lieu of distribution centers? What do you think that relationship is?
It's a good question. I don't know, man. It's kind of weird to me that they decided not to get rid of them and replace them, because I thought that was their intention. But I think that they would probably realize that they would cut down the play space quite a lot right now, given that they don't have a whole lot of stuff getting going ready. 13 distribution centers is not a whole lot. I mean, like, it sounds like a lot, but the bunkers are in every moon and planet in the Stanton system, and those are really cool locations to get down on the ground and experience. So you cut those out, well, then you've got no got no real missions to get down there for a lot of those moons. You know, we do have the new like shanty towns and what have you, but those are only on Microtech and some moons. I think there's some on Daymar and there's some on Hurston, but they're not on every moon and planet. They're not suited to every moon and planet because those are no atmosphere or really hostile atmosphere moons and planets. So they got to keep them. I think what they should do with them is just expand a little bit on them. Like they still haven't added any ground patrols to them like they once upon a time talked about with NPCs. They've got you know, AI pathing, which has been now in the game for quite some time, but we've not seen it leveraged a whole lot. Well, why not put some NPCs to defend the bunkers up top? You know, make it a bit more challenging to approach.
I thought we were gonna get stuff like that when they started putting those turrets outside the bunkers that are just there for no reason. There's like these little, I don't know what you call them, like chain gun turrets, basically, just like large machine guns, and you get on one and you're like, okay, what do I shoot? Why is this here?
Yeah, it's like there's so many. The weird thing about Star Citizen is there's so many disconnected, incomplete ideas, and in a lot of cases they get left forever to the point where you're like, is this just never gonna happen anymore? Like, have you abandoned this idea? Like those guns feel that way, don't they? Because they haven't. Yeah, it's just like they put them in. It was a thing, and now what?
Those guns
like
in the
push cards
came in.
We got push cards.
Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah.
They're doing hover. They're now doing hover cards, and that's supposed to be in 3.23. So
it's
at least we're getting something out of that.
But yeah, I think
that was always a thing that had to be done. By the way, there's no way wheels were ever going to work in Star Citizen with like going down ramps, going on terrain, like a lot of the stations don't even have places to like properly push stuff. Because they got stairs and like they're not. Let's just say they're not ADA accessible. So
yeah, that wouldn't have worked. you said something pretty good. Now I need to remember. I think you're right about the UGFs. They offer. They might still be outdated, but they offer a smaller, more compact game space underground. I don't think that would really get replaced by the distribution centers, and until we get distribution centers with underground facilities, which they specifically said are not ready yet but will happen, they'll probably keep those smaller ones around and then get rid of them whenever they can expand.
Yeah, I don't think they need to even get rid of them. They just need to update them. So one of the things they did was the server. Remember the server mission that they added in, right? The uplink mission, or whether some server. I actually haven't been able to take it personally and experience it, but I know there's a mission with the server racks that are in the basement of the UGFs to take part in.
Yeah.
So like giving those locations other missions to do. Oh, and then the one that I did do was actually pretty good. Was the retrieve contraband, where you have to go to the wall thing and get the contraband out, and then start spawning NPCs to come chase after you. Unfortunately, NPCs don't work very well with the tick rate being low, but
the mission's good
when
though.
They do work. It's pretty fun. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So stuff like that, quick, easy in out, fun, like small scale experiences that only take maybe 20 minutes of your time. That's I think what the UGFs, the current bunkers can be, and then UGFs can be more of like a 40-minute experience, right? Like it's a little bit more involved to get down in there and to do the things, but maybe there's more engaging and bigger scale stuff to experience. So I don't think they ever have to get rid of them. Maybe they, when they said that, they weren't seeing the big picture. They weren't thinking about the big picture yet.
Well, yeah, so. I don't know if they ever said they would get rid of them. I always thought they were just going to get redesigned with this new system, because they basically were like,
that's
UGFs.
What I thought they were talking about.
Yeah, size extra small, small, large, extra large.
The way they said it was that it was only ever a bunker created for CitizenCon. It was never intended to be around for so long, right? So the way they made it sound was like these UGFs were the things that they always imagined doing, right? But I guess they've decided to go, well, just keep that content, which I think is a good move.
Yeah,
you got it anyway. Move. It's content. Star Citizen is starved for content. Leave it in there and add to it, right? Don't take some stuff away.
Yeah, and when you've got like
don't take away Mike Delamar again.
Oh, please no. And when you got like 6 different archetype styles to make a bunch of locations out of, you might as well keep what you made and figure it out. Let's talk about master modes. This is
the hot topic.
Yeah.
The hot topic
so for anybody who watches the podcast, we had an episode last week, and let me just say, the episode about Master Modes last week, which I think at some point had 7,000 views, had more comments on it than like some of my most popular videos with like 90 to 120,000 views. People want to talk about this, and for those who don't know, we'll actually be having a CIG dev on the show coming up soon to talk more about Master Modes and how they've been developed. But it is so contentious, and people get so angry about it. Somebody in a disagreement about Master Modes told me that we deserved what happened to our house. I was like, dude, you need to chill. People are
That's
really
too far.
Really passionate about this.
Wow.
What is your take?
When you talk about people's expensive internet spaceships, man, you got to be ready for some heated comments. All right.
My bad.
Don't touch people's expensive internet spaceships.
Sorry about the speed of your ship. I won't touch it again.
So I was just having this discussion the other day. It's interesting this comes up. I just want to touch on this first. I think a lot of people feel very strongly about the way ships are balanced and the way they are now is because, you know, the way that you obtain ships in the game, whether or not we call it that, it feels like you're buying it. You're buying a ship. So you feel like there's a personal big investment in a ship that you've purchased, especially an expensive one, right? Like a Hammerhead is like $800, right? So people feel very, very strongly about the way they envision the ship to be when they bought it. And if it's not that way, they can get quite upset. And so I think it becomes quite difficult to discuss balance or ship design and stuff sometimes, where some people have this very clear idea when in reality Star Citizen is not done yet. And there are a lot of systems missing that are going to change the balance of the experience. And now I think we segue into Master Mode. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just a big problem for CIG.
Yeah, it is a big problem of their own making, but without it, there wouldn't be Star Citizen. So it is what it is. They've just got to deal with what the monsters that they've created. Star Citizen wouldn't exist without expensive ship sales. Hate it or love it.
So, all right. So Master Modes is, well, yeah, I'm just trying to figure, like, how do you approach this? Master Modes is a big change to ships that people are very invested in. Well, but it's also,
let's
go ahead.
Maybe we start by maybe we can start by summarizing for people what's the issue with Master Modes. So what's happening with it, and then why do people have an issue with it?
Well, so really the biggest thing Master Modes is doing is changing the speed that people can play at. This is where I think a lot of the conversation is angled around. This is essentially taking capable SCM speeds or capable combat speeds from Google, I'm not talking to you, from around 900 to 1200 meters per second down to about 250 to 300 meters per second. That's a big change. I'm not a combat player, so like I'm like, okay, I can fight slower. But when I talk to combat players, I realize that a lot of the experience that you can have in this game is built around being able to move, being able to dodge shots because you have a certain level of thrust, being able to carry momentum because you're flying in a certain way. That's not to say that you should be able to tricord or game the physics of the game, but being able to go 100 meters per second in, to the side, or no, let's not say that. Being able to go 100 meters per second around your foe is much more powerful than going 30 meters per second around your foe. And the crux of the argument for a lot of people is, if you are able to do that and the ship allows you to do that, then you should be able to do that in a simulated environment. The other side of the coin is, well, yeah, you could do that if you have 1,000 hours of experience with it, but for the most part, that makes it very difficult for other players to get a grasp of how the system works. Everybody's flying too fast. Nobody gets a really good-looking experience in the game, which, let's be honest, Star Citizen tries to be good-looking, but also they just want to keep players closer together because they want players to interact with each other more when they're fighting, rather than flying 2,000 meters away and spending half the time getting back. So, like, I can definitely see both sides of that, because we want a game that is fun for a lot of people, but we also want a game that's got a lot of skill that, like you said, gives you that choice and then hits you with the consequence for that choice. And part of that, this whole time, ever since we started, was that the consequence of flying too fast was that you might not be as good at combat. Now that possibility is being taken away. And personally, it doesn't bother me that much. I haven't gotten to test it really that much. It doesn't bother me that much when I'm fighting, because I'm not much of a fighter, but I come at it from the perspective of, this is a game about flexing your skill and then dealing with, you know, whatever kind of crap you kick up. Hover mode was kind of the same way. They were saying, hey, you know, we're going to give people the ability to, we're going to hit people with the consequence of hover mode, in the sense that flying in gravity, staying still in gravity is more difficult. But we're not going to give you the ability to actually test that. We're just going to force you into a mode so that you can't flex the simulation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's where I understand the argument.
So I think you've summarized it well. I think you've summarized it very well. And it's just there. The problem is that Star Citizen has been a certain way for so long that people have gotten used to the way that it is, and they only see that. They're kind of narrowly focused on it, and I think they maybe overlook the bigger picture of what skill can mean in the game when it's more complete. Obviously, we don't have that yet, and it's hard to just say that now, but let me try to explain this. So the current system right now, if you've not played Star Citizen before, focus very heavily, because of the way that ship speeds work, around light fighters, which are the most nimble and fastest ships in the game. The meta has been, for the very longest time, almost since the very beginning of the experience of the PU, completely focused around light to sometimes medium and sometimes heavy fighters, but never anything bigger than that. If you're not flying a Gladius or an Arrow or a Vanguard or a Scorpius or a Hurricane, these are all light, medium, and heavy fighters, you're just going to get destroyed. You try to fly a Hammerhead around, you think you're going to be so badass because you've got 7 people in your ship with you and they're all manning all the guns, all the turrets are firing. You can get kited by one dude and die. One dude in an Arrow and a light fighter, and you just get toasted because you can't hit him.
Yeah.
Which is a problem. That's the way that it's been. That is the system that's being defended right now with the engagement speeds that we have. So I understand that some people like these engagement speeds, because right now it's very much about the individual pilot's ability to leverage their skill and experience with these very fast speeds, which are hard to wrap your mind around, to gain an advantage over the player, right? The engagement speeds right now, I kid you not, can be relative to one another 2 kilometers a second. You're both traveling, no kidding, a kilometer a second towards each other. You're traveling relative 2 kilometers a second. So you see him, oh, he's gone. Like, that's it. That's it. And that's not even, if you want to talk about realism, watch The Expanse. That's realism right there.
They never even see the people.
Seeing the person you're engaging, and that's what would really happen. You're shooting at each other from extreme ranges. And you can do that because the speeds people move at and their projected paths of movement are so narrowly limited by the speeds they're traveling that you can predict flight paths with like missiles and railguns and stuff, and that's how you would engage.
They also, their bullets don't disappear after 2,000 meters.
Their bullets don't disappear. Yeah, they don't disappear. That's reality. That can be fun in some context. For a game like Star Citizen, which is a video game, I don't think that's the way that they've been going. That's certainly not the way the ships have been designed. They're not designed to be like the Expanse ships. They're more like what you've seen in Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica. That's always been the influence. And so they kind of have to operate in the idea of being a space plane. So I think right now what's happening is like a lot of these people who are very upset, and I respect them immensely, like for example, Adventure One, like he's a great combat pilot. They're very much focused on this current system where it's all about the individual pilot's skill, right? You're a badass fighter, right? And that is kind of being taken away by these speeds coming down. But these speeds coming down are necessary to make the other ships that exist in the game have any kind of functional role in combat. Because unlike in a game like DCS, where it's mimicking the real world, where you're flying around and amazing fighters. That's not how space works in the Star Citizen universe. You've got big ships moving around as well. It's almost like you have a carrier flying around next to you. in the air next to your F-15 or your F-16 or your F-35, right? That doesn't happen, but in Star Citizen, it's like that. You've got these corvettes flying along with you. And so what I think we should maybe think about is, before we get too critical on these changes, is be open to the idea that we need to start thinking about how Star Citizen's skill experience and what skill means as the game starts to expand to include these ships in the balance. Because perhaps skill no longer means, and the fun of the experience, which is core to it, right? The fun of being skilled isn't so much about being an individually crack pilot that can take out 20 guys by yourself. It becomes more about your fleet composition, with who you're working together, how you're working together, your timing. And I can tell you there are other games that do this, and they're super fun with super high skill ceilings, but not because the individual pilot's really, really good. It's because they work together super, super well, and everybody's pretty good. So for example, I think EVE Online, not saying this game should be EVE Online, but if you look at the individual flight of a single ship in EVE Online, it's about controlling and clicking where your ship is going. Just on a small scale, it's not that engaging. It's not that, there's not much skill really involved. It's about timing and positioning. That's it. You got to hit your guns at the right time, jump away at the right time. But when you throw a bunch of ships into a fleet battle together, it becomes really complex. You've got lots of different ships with different roles that have to come in at different times, and you need to pay attention to all of this at once, or you're going to get killed. You have to be in the right place at the right time with your friends in order to survive and come out on top in a big engagement. And the bigger the engagement gets, the more complex and skill you need to come out on top, especially if you are outnumbered, which a lot of the time happens in EVE Online. So I think in Star Citizen, in a future version of the game, where these big ships actually play a role that people have paid for, by the way, which are in the game. Sorry, we can't get rid of them. We can't just have light fighters. They need to have some kind of interesting role that they play in the whole thing, and I think it could still be a lot of fun. We also have to consider, for example, that the objective in the current game is to kill each other with very little other purpose.
All the time.
Where in the future, right.
Literally everything. The freaking Argo raft has a promo picture of it shooting its weapons.
Right, pew pew pew. Let's kill each other. Which is fun. Don't get me wrong. Like there's a place for that. But I think that once we have other scenarios that are natural to the game, like holding an important point on a planet's surface for your organization because it's profitable, that the whole focus of the experience changes a lot more from being a crack pilot and killing the other guy to surviving the day and holding your ground. And sometimes that means you may have to sacrifice, your ship or something. And the whole experience is going to change a whole lot. So I guess to sum it up, I think people are too focused on the current experience and how it's going to become worse because of the slower speeds, instead of maybe thinking that they're finally moving forward to a much bigger picture experience that could be a lot more fun and engaging with a different type of skill cap than just individual piloting skill cap. I will say that there's still a possibility for lower speeds to have a high skill cap. I don't think because you're moving slower, that necessarily means it's that the skill cap is lower. Though I'm sure PvP pilots will argue to death on this because they've got more experience than me, certainly, in this. But I'm just saying we need to be more open to that, because there's a lot of other ships in this game that have never played a role in combat that will suddenly have a role in combat. And let's actually see how they do, because we don't know yet. The only ship that's in there is the Constellation, and hardly anybody's playing Master Modes right now to figure out how good that is or how bad that is. I heard it's pretty good from Avenger 1, who's tried it. But let's talk about, like, how does the Eclipse play a role? How does the Gladiator play a role? The mini bomber. How does the Hammerhead play a role? Like, how do these all these different ships and their composition play a role in combat, and how might that shape the way skill is measured in Star Citizen? So yeah, that's kind of my view on it. I've had some time to think about this.
I think that I will say that the angle of fleets and capital ships is a very important one. That's actually something I forgot to say. They're very clearly starting to build the game for capital ship gameplay. It's not a coincidence that the Polaris is in the works and expected by the end of this year. Yeah. It's not a coincidence that engineering is happening. All this stuff is definitely moving more towards multi-crew and multi-ship gameplay. But I'm also thinking nobody should be able to take out 20 pilots. I agree with you there. Even the best pilots in all the fictions and stuff, they're not taking out 20 ships on their own. But there should be a very clear difference, I think. maybe not a difference that's made artificially, but you should be able to tell somebody who's really good at something versus somebody who just picked it up quickly. I'm thinking about this as who I actually am in the game, an exploration or data runner person. I don't care about combat. Folks might think I'm rooting for one side or the other here. I want whatever is going to be best for the game long term, and I see reasons why both of these things, both higher speeds and lower speeds, might be good. But when I look at something like engineering, which is going to be a pretty in-depth profession, something that people are going to dedicate all their game time to, I do worry about whether or not engineering will have enough complexity and long-term value if it is balanced so that other players are able to grasp it easily. If they're not making engineering as deep as possible for the people who want to be an engineer on that hammerhead for 2 years straight, is there a possibility that that makes engineering a less engaging profession because they've had to kind of ease it down so it's not as difficult to pick up?
You know, I think we've had this conversation before. I don't think engineering needs to be complex. I understand that some people may have this idea and that they want it to be really, really in depth, but I don't think for the game to be successful that's a realistic expectation or possibility. What I mean is that in the heat of combat, the act of taking your time to go do a thing to keep you flying doesn't need to be ultra complex, because the things that are happening all at once are already going to be enough to take in. What I mean is, like, you're getting in combat, things are happening, things are breaking. If all you have to do is go and press a button to stop something from blowing up, but there's a lot of buttons you have to press around the ship, that's pretty damn hectic, especially if it's all, you know, like, it's happening very, very fast, all while people are shooting and defending the ship, and maybe you're about to get boarded. So it doesn't need to be super complex to be fun and engaging. But I can understand why some people want, like, super in-depth gameplay with engineering. I actually think Helldivers has a really way of doing the busy work of, like, engineering and like surveying and stuff. So I'm not saying we have to have, like, up, down, left, right, whatever, but it just needs to be something simple and busy that needs a little bit of concentration, that puts you in a disadvantage from other people surrounding, like, if there's other stuff going on, because you got to focus on it, right? Mm-hmm. That gets you focused, that gets you a little bit stressed out because you have to focus on it to get it done. And that's all it needs to really do to be fun and engaging. I don't ever feel like, oh man, I wish there was more complex engineering systems in Helldivers 2.
But what if we're
I just think, yeah.
What if we're not talking about combat, though? Because engineering is not just combat. Like, they want there to be a tuning profession, somebody who's basically going in and starting a ship up. It seems, at least what they're saying, starting a ship up or getting the components ready in a way that's going to help the ship later, whether it's through buffs or something. And I'm thinking,
sure, you can still do that.
Yeah, but what if that is one of the types of things that they're like, okay, well, every player wants to get involved in this more. Maybe we should, instead of making it up, down, left, right, B, A, spin in a circle, we tell them they need to just tap A few times to fill a bar, and then it goes. Then they're good, successful startup. And this is, I'm literally spinning this on a camera in the middle of the podcast, but it's more the idea behind anything else. How much do you change the game for the good of all players at the possible expense of, say, that 5% that is obsessed with it? I'm not saying that one way is right or another, but this is, I think, an important conversation when somebody is trying to build the best damn space sim, but also trying to build a video game that can appeal and apply to a lot of people.
It's a tough question, man. I don't know. I don't know how you make that balance work to where it's fun, engaging, complex enough to keep you interested, but also approachable. Like, that's a really tough line to walk.
Yeah.
I certainly think they're going to lean simulation, seeing how Star Citizen has always leaned somewhat simulation. Mm-hmm. Not fully, obviously, because there's a lot of it that's very sci-fi-esque. You know, like I already said, that we've got space planes. That's not realistic, right? So, yeah. It's got that believable feel to it, but so it's somewhat feels right, like it's grounded in reality, but it also kind of looks right. But maybe it's not realistic. It's not actually realistic, and that's not all they have to achieve with it. But I think once they have all these different systems in, like if all they have are sliders for tuning the different components in your ship to perform well or perform a certain way, but then you also have the factor of like certain components are better than others depending on where you bought them from and how they've been manufactured. And then you have the other component of what components you actually have on board your ship. And then you have the other systems of how they connect and in combat how they can be rerouted. I think we already have gotten to a point with the way they've described things of being quite complex. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of people talking for hours in chat rooms, forums, and discords about what's the best configuration to run, what's the best way to set your power and what have you. I'm sure that's going to happen with the systems they've already created. So I don't know if it needs to be any more complex than it's already been described.
That's fair.
I do think though, like if they can do some things more, they should do them maybe to make it feel a little bit more immersive. So like maybe you actually have to put out, like the putting out the fire thing is kind of immersive, right? Because it's like there's a fire that started, you got to put it out. But other things like maybe you have to seal a breach with like the tool, like the multi-tool, right? You have to go there, you see that the air is leaking out, so you got to like seal it or something, or you have to cut a hole in a ship in a certain place to get into it. For example, like these types of little immersive pieces, I think
hard space
can add to and enhance the experience. Yeah. Hard space shipbreaker.
You make a good point. That's actually something that I should keep in mind because I always talk about it, but there's a lot of stuff going on in this game that you have to pay attention to, and it might not be the gameplay itself that's super complex. Like in mining, you're just putting a laser on a rock.
Right? Yeah. But all together,
it adds more.
Then it starts to get more complex. It's already like if you just look at mining at surface, it feels simple, but you talk to Salty Mike, he'll tell you like, oh, you need to run, this and this head with like he's got they've kind of figured it out a little bit. They've got their own ideas on like what the best balance is.
Yeah, I guess.
And it's not even.
Go ahead.
All the systems aren't even in yet, so it's already kind of its own like nice complex gameplay loop. With the engineering, I very much expect it'll be even more so.
Mm-hmm. With combat, bit of a unique situation because it's the one thing that we've always had, is the one thing CIG is always dependent on to sell the game, like you said, and has set expectations for ships, and it's just been around so long that you would think it's in its spot. And so having such a drastic change right now at this time, when there are still so many things in combat, missiles, countermeasures, e-war, heck, even like mines and stuff, are things that we don't really think about that could also complicate all this stuff.
How does an EMP affect the ship systems, and how as an engineer will you combat an EMP? What must you do to get your ship running again in this system with an EMP? Like there's all, like as you say, there's so many different things to consider.
Yep.
For systems that may seem on the surface so simple. I think I always go back to compare to look at a game like it's that pirate game like made by Microsoft.
Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves. Yeah. I played it for a little bit. It was fun. So Sea of Thieves is a super complex, gamified experience. But if you ever fought on like a galley with 4 people and you got to patch holes and shoot something, it like all these things. It's a super simple game, super simple idea. But it gets really, really hectic, and it's fun. It's hectic and fun. Like, you don't need super complex systems to have a super complex and hectic experience. So it doesn't need to be too over the top. You don't have to be actually going back and connecting wires and pipes and programming things in code.
Well,
I'm sure some people would love that. But let's be realistic here. Most people can't do that, and it wouldn't be approachable for most people.
There's certainly a balance, and beyond the design and the engineering of this gameplay, finding that balance is probably one of the hardest parts of making a game like this.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on 3.23 overall? Just to wrap things up, that's the next update coming out, and there's plenty that could be happening after that, but we don't really have much to go off of. So in terms of this next patch coming up, how are you feeling?
I'm a little bit concerned that more things are going to get cut. We already know that the lifts with vehicles are cut, so we won't have vehicles being spawned on the cargo lifts, which is kind of a big thing that I think most people that I know were excited for, because it's always been such a pain to get vehicles for any kind of event started. Like, it would have saved us so much time, effort, and headache. So it's so sad that they cut that. So I kind of worry that other things are going to fall off like that. But ultimately, the patch, if you really look at it, a lot of it's very much needed quality of life stuff. So I'm a little bit worried that the longevity of the patch won't be as long as we hope, but we'll just have to see. I mean, if it's all quality of life and all the interface and everything's better, but ultimately we're still playing the same gaming experience, is it going to be that much different than now? It's going to look better. It's going to maybe be a little bit easier to approach, but is it going to be, is the core gameplay, is the way that it respects your time going to be better?
No, I don't think I don't think this is really much of a core gameplay change. I do think that reputation and cargo missions are going to be something that gives us some lasting change here. But I don't know much about like game changing stuff. I think game changing stuff is still more coming so in the rest of the year, but like these quality of life changes are bordering on those changes. Like a new star map is
they're really
that
important.
Does change the way that we play. I probably waste, I would say the time spent in the star map, I probably waste like 30 to 50% of that time. That's time gotten back.
I think though, you know, there's a good possibility that the change of the master modes though might be enough of a difference to make it feel like a different game a bit, because we finally have other ships to take into combat. So combat could become very, very interesting. You know, that could give the experience a lot more longevity, certainly. So I think it's up in the air. We just don't know yet, but there's possibilities.
It's all about stability.
Yeah, there's nothing core new.
It's all about stability.
Except for the distribution centers, yeah.
Like if I have a good HUD, a good looting system, and a good time in FPS combat, then, you know, bunker missions are going to feel completely different. But if I'm going out there with this new mini map and all this stuff, and yeah, it all looks good, but I'm still running at 3 frames per second on the server and 15 frames per second on my machine, and it's just not fun, then yeah, I don't think it'll be that big a difference. So your experience might vary.
It's very uncertain. I have high hopes, but I'm going to keep my expectations low so I'm not heartbroken when it releases.
That's fair. That is fair, my friend. Well, thank you so much for joining me for the show today. It was
my pleasure.
This one really had to get pulled out. I did not know if this was going to happen. I sat down in my chair like 2 hours ago, or I guess an hour before the podcast, and realized that it was moldy and wet, and we grabbed like the dining room chair. So we kind of been throwing this one together, and I really appreciate you coming at this sort of weird time. But now that I'm back in Turkey, our time zones match up a bit more, which is nice.
Yeah. It's much more easy for us to get together. In fact, we got to do some gaming sessions together as well.
Yes. I gotta say, one of my favorite parts of yeah, I need to play Helldivers. I tried it first week, couldn't get in, and haven't had a chance since. So I'll try playing it again sometime these upcoming weeks. But I gotta say, one of my best parts about CitizenCon was getting to sit next to Morph and watch as he started out a little bit kind of okay about the presentation, but by the end being pretty gung-ho about the stuff you saw. That was good times.
Yeah, exciting. I'm excited for this year overall. Still excited for Star Citizen. Still pumped.
Well,
it's just going to be a little bit longer before we start seeing this acceleration. Like, when's 323 going into P2? Come on, soon. Let's go.
Yeah. Hopefully it does get into testing soon. And there's also a lot of good games coming out from like small companies, which is great. Pal World and Helldivers both being highlights early on this year. And I love to see, like, the games industry is rough right now, but there's still a lot of good stuff coming out of it, which is cool. So other stuff to play while you're waiting. Anyways, man.
Indeed.
Thanks again for joining me. And before we go, could you let everybody know where they might find your own wonderful content?
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on YouTube under Morphologis, no T, and on Twitch as well, where I try to stream Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, but I don't always keep to that schedule. And I'm also on like Twitter and stuff, so you can, if you want to watch me complain about things, you can go there. So yeah, that's me. Listen
to this guy still calling it Twitter. Get with the times, Grandpa.
I mean, X or whatever.
No, I still call it Twitter. I still literally type in Twitter as the address. I still call it Twitter. I tweet. Everything's changed, but nothing's changed. But yeah, check out his videos, folks. I think you were saying this during the podcast. This might have been before we were talking, but you had mentioned that I had inspired some of your content. Folks, go look at his stuff. Okay, when Morphologis is like the OG quality content of Star Citizen, your architect reviews are what got me into the more into the game. I liked the game.
Thank you.
You made me appreciate the spaceships a lot more. That stuff's inspiring. Go check that out on his YouTube channel. And you said you're streaming what, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday?
That's right. Yep.
What time?
At 9 a.m. Eastern Standard. 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S.
Okay, that actually kind of lines up. We should do some stuff on stream at some point.
Yes, we should. Yes, definitely.
Cool, man.
I'm down.
Well, thanks again for joining me, and everybody, thank you for coming. As always, supporters, you can come and watch these and listen live, and also talk to us before and after the show. At times we have text chat, also do some voice stuff. But you can also get your name on our referral code randomizer. You get exclusive videos. There's a lot of perks for the support. So if you want to, check that out down below on YouTube, or if you're on an audio platforms, thank you so much for listening. There's no ads there. It is supported by supporters, so you can check out Patreon too. Besides all that, though, we're still recovering from our own house troubles. So a couple delays on videos and streams coming up, but happy to be back with you all shortly. Morph,
yeah,
thank you one final time for coming on, and everybody else.
My pleasure, man.
Yeah, dude, it's always a good talk. And everybody else, I will see you all next week for a special episode.